There's one thing everyone can agree on in Washington these days. It's the importance of grandchildren.
We don't want to be the first generation that leaves fewer opportunities for our children and grandchildren than we inherited from our parents.
We're worried about our children and our grandchildren, and we can't keep on going like we are.
We are concerned about passing that debt on to our kids and our grandkids.
We simply can't continue to mortgage the future of our unborn children and grandchildren.
People don't want to have put this huge debt on their children or their grandchildren's shoulders.
Trillions of dollars of more debt loaded on our children and grandchildren.
The debt burden on our children and grandchildren.
A mountain range of debt we're piling on our children and grandchildren.
The as yet unborn grandchildren of America are perhaps the best represented political group in this great nation of ours, at least rhetorically. So it's a little funny, given our great concern about America's grandchildren and the world they will inherit, that while all this grandchildren rhetoric is buzzing around the Capitol, particularly boisterous and vociferous, as you just saw on the Republican side of the aisle, that the entire House GOP leadership team would have signed onto an Americans for Prosperity no climate tax pledge. According to the blog for the group Americans for Prosperity, more than 525 elected officials have now signed on to this pledge to oppose, well, apparently any sort of climate tax. What that means in practice is this: we're not even going to try to stop the planet from warming. We don't even care if we give our grandchildren a hotter planet. A planet with far more unpredictable and disastrous weather events, a planet with droughts and higher sea levels, a planet with global unrest and refugees and resource wars across the globe. All of these things, future grandchildren of America, we give to you. Look, I've been sitting in Washington watching this hysteria over long-run actuarial projections about the deficit with my mouth agape. There is a problem down the road with, for example, the ballooning cost of health care in this country, and we're going to have to deal with it. We already tried to a little bit with the health care reform bill. There's no question about that. But when you're talking about problems that involve moving money around, cutting taxes, increasing spending, those are difficult problems. But from one day to the next, you can solve those problems. You can put money into an account. You can fix money problems. It's been done before. A balanced budget deal was struck during the Clinton presidency. When Social Security was in crisis during the Reagan years, a deal was struck to save it. These things have been done before. Disaster has been averted. Physics is another thing entirely. You can't just wake up one day, survey the U.S., see that we can no longer grow corn in Iowa because the summers are too hot there, and just vacuum the carbon out of the air. So if you want to talk about grandchildren, check it out. Right now, the leaders of one party have completely abrogated their moral responsibility to future generations. At the same time, they're beating their chests with grand and martyred nobility about all they're doing for their grandchildren. Joining us now is the Assistant Legislative Director for the United Steelworkers, Roxanne Brown, the Steelworkers point person on climate change. Roxy, thanks so much for joining me.
Thanks for having me, Chris.
Okay, so first of all, I think you got an interesting perspective. You're from the steelworkers, and why is it the steelworkers have been so ardent in their support of climate change legislation, including a tax on carbon? It seems a bit antithetical.
You know, Chris, our union's concern around issues involving the environment really stems from our desire to have safer working conditions for our members. So, you know, this is something that we've been concerned with, you know, since the 60s, something that we've been working on for over 40 years. And in 1990, we identified global warming as the most pressing challenge facing our future, and in a document actually entitled "Our Children's World." So a lot of the rhetoric that you talked about in the segment just before this is actually not rhetoric to us. It's something that we are seriously trying to work to attain a cleaner, sustainable environment for our current members and workers, but also their future children and our future grandchildren. And
even the grandchildren. So
absolutely.
Let me ask you, I know you've done a lot of work on the Hill around the climate change legislation that was there. First of all, with this pledge that's been signed by the House leadership, is there any meaningful climate change without a tax on carbon, without a price on carbon?
You know, yes. I think, you know, the reality is we are going into a very different Congress in the 112th Congress that begins in January. And will we see a comprehensive climate bill? chances are, no, we won't see that. But I think we will see things, or that we can see things that are seen as bites at the apple. So a strong renewable electricity standard is one thing that can be real and something that actually can do something great in terms of reducing our greenhouse gas emissions and creating jobs. Programs like Building Star and Home Star and policies that encourage industrial energy efficiency are all things that have strong bipartisan support in Washington and can be done in this Congress.
The Republican argument, the big argument they marshal out, is that this is a jobs killer, that it's
Right.
that it's going to be bad for business. Policy-wise, I wonder how you answer that. I mean, presumably something that puts steelworkers out of business would be bad, right? So you guys must have a perspective on this that doesn't see it that way.
This is a very old argument for us in the steelworkers. Like I said, this is something that we've been dealing with for over 40 years. We were very key players in the shaping of the Clean Air Act and series of toxics policies. And this is something that we've been hearing for a long time from the business community, that all these policies are jobs killers. And we've, in fact, seen the opposite. Mm-hmm. And, we strongly believe that clean energy policy, that climate policy can, in fact, drive investment, development, and deployment of these technologies that can spur job creation, job retention. In the steelworkers, we often talk about the fact that a lot of the jobs we're talking about are jobs that already exist right now. There are 8,000 component parts in a wind turbine. The steel plates, the nacelles, the gears, all of those parts are being made right now by some of our members around the country for different applications like defense and automotive. So, there's no reason that we can't do the same thing for those clean energy technologies that we're hoping to see grow in the United States.
Roxy Brown is the Assistant Legislative Director for the United Steelworkers. Thanks so much for joining me. You are
Thanks, Chris.
ardently pro-grandchild.
Thanks, Chris.